Councillors, I think we better make a start. It's 10 o'clock now. So good morning, everyone. I declare the council meeting CL25/6 open and welcome everyone here. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and the consequences of that. I shall start with our usual karakia. Whakatau mai te wara, whakawate mai te hinanaro, whakarite mai te tinana, kia ai ngā mahi. Councillor Daly's not here, so I'll seek an apology for lateness from mover and seconder, Councillor Thwaites, Councillor Joyce. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. There are no late items. Does anyone have a declaration of interest? No? Okay. There's no public excluded items and there's no public forum. So we'll now move on to item 9.1, which is the local order Dunwell hearings, and we just need to move and the recommendation that the advisors report be received. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Murray Bench, Councillor Henry. Seeing there's no debate, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So now moving on to hear from the submitters, and first up we have Mr. John Butt. And John, would you like to take a seat at the front there and press the button on the right-hand button on the microphone, and when it's red, you're live. So just for everyone's benefit, each submitter has 10 minutes, and that will include questions. It's quite a long day today, so we'll try hard to keep to time. Whenever you're ready, John.
Oh, sorry. Well, water well done. We wonder. My name is John Button and I've been a master plumber since 1960, retiring in 2010. For the past 25 years, I have been testing backflow devices and had a business called Backflow Protection Services, which I sold in 2000. In 1997, I was invited to help evaluate the independent qualified persons course established at Unitec. I was employed by the Tauranga City Council in 1997 to correctly install backflow devices to 140 surge pumps. Now, the reason I put that in there is councils are employing labourers when in fact they should be skilled people, and that's why the 140 weren't correctly installed. And in 2002, I was employed by Duffel, Watson King on a contract to the Western Bay District Council to report on water connections, with approximately 650 reports produced. My experience with water supplies started in 1961 with the Water Supplies Protection Regulations. Had this regulation been applied as it should have been, then there would be no problems today. But because it came under the 1956 Health Act, local government just said, Health Act, nothing to do with us, and it was revoked after 30 years. From around 1960 to 1991, although the government had a 2-to-1 subsidy for councils to upgrade water supplies, very few councils took advantage of the subsidy. Tauranga Borough Council did, under Hugh Binney, didn't access the subsidy and built a sand filtration treatment at Oropi. North Shore Council did the same and had a better system because it had an automatic backwash. A council can have the best filtration system in the world, but without backflow protection, there is no guarantee the water quality will be the same standard as the last flowing outlet. With regards to the three waters, sewage, potable water and stormwater, sewage systems are generally functioning reasonably well. Potable water supply needs careful attention. And with regard to backflow provisions, stormwater is problematic as the runoff is often polluted from a number of sources and degrades harbour water quality. I can take you to two properties 20 minutes from here in Western Bay where they've got a bore and can connect it directly up to the council supply. So what's the point in filtering water when people are doing that sort of thing? I can go on for some time on this subject. I've been invited to the States as a guest speaker and a world expert on backflow protection. People don't seem to realise just how important that is. So now, yes, the runoff from the roading and things, lots of possums and things like that, all eventually squashed on the road, they eventually finish up in the harbour. And that's one very new, the sewage systems are reasonably good in the Western Bay, and the potable water certainly needs a lot of attention. I don't know whether there's any questions or anything like that.
Thank you, Mr. Bunt. Are there any questions for us? I see Councillor Thwaites has his hand up. So, Councillor Thwaites.
Thanks, John, for coming in this morning and kicking us off and telling us. Do you have any stats over how many poisoning cases ever occurred through backflow, not prevention, through allowance of backflow? Did that lead on to people being hospitalised or poisoned or anything? Do you have any of that stats?
Well, I do. I have like a video CD of cases. And of course, the one that we probably all remember of late was the Waitoa one over in the Waitoa dairy factory. And I know someone who was going to do a master's degree on the and what happened when this chap, his son, was having a shower in the morning and it was caustic soda, and he rang up to call out to his brother, look, the water's gone all slimy, can you let Dad know? And they put in caustic soda into the piping system to clean all the pipes out in the dairy factory. But the thing that the press didn't know and was that
difficulty hearing you. If we just move this a little closer.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right.
And they had the police there with a car and a loud hailer, letting everyone know that don't touch the water, drink the water or anything. And one of the chaps, the employees at the factory, and this never came out in the public, was that his wife was going to visit her sister in Te Awamutu, and she made up some baby bottles of formula, and as soon as the police found out that, they screamed off down to Te Awamutu to warn her not to use these baby formulas. So that's how close to a death around here, but we've had several other cases.
Thanks, yeah, that. No.
Thank you. Councillor Murray-Bench.
Thank you so much, Mr. Butt, for presenting to us today. I read your submission and it's detailed, and obviously you would like your work to be included with whoever takes over a CCO or council with our water supply. That's quite clear. You would like that to go forward and not be lost.
I think it was more of a statement, Councillor Murray Bench, but I
No,
appreciate
all I
the-
needed for him was to say, yes, sir.
Okay, right. Right, I don't see any more questions, so we'll move on to the next person. But thank you very much, Mr. Butt. I appreciate your contribution and your submission. So thank you very much for coming in.
And is here.
Okay, next up we have former Mayor Gary Webber. If you'd like to come to the front, please.
Kidoi te mihi kia koutou, koramatua James, nā kai kangiera, Tumuaki Miriam, nā kai mahi, bei te iwi o tangata tūti, ko Gary Webber toku ingoa. Greetings, Mayor James, Councillor, Chief Executive Miriam, staff, and people of the treaty. Hopefully you're aware my name is Gary Webber. I'm sure you've all read my submissions. However, there are three main points I wish to make in an effort to get you to focus on the big issues as I see them. The first is resource consents. For the new councillors, I was part of the government group, which was under the Labor government, and was able to see some significant reports on the status of resource consents throughout the nation. And you'd be surprised the number of councils that do not have current resource consents and are uncompliant with taumata aroai. And many of them, in my view, they were waiting for Big Brother to come along and help them out. So the point I hope to make, given the three waters, drinking, waste and storm, that you hope to do well, make up about 30% of your annual infrastructure costs. I wonder how many of you councillors are really aware of the current state of resource consents and their compliance for those councils that may wish to amalgamate with you. Buying a problem where Western Bay has done, in my opinion, an incredibly good job and was considered one of the better councils in the three water space. Be very careful those who are willing to join you, because they have got a major financial problem. The second one is the second point I wish to make is financial contributions. Financial contributions should not just cover the costs which the developer pays to put the infrastructure in the ground for any new lot. They must also cover the additional costs required to process the new volumes of three waters that are generated by the new lots, because those additional volumes add cumulative costs. In fact, based on my experience, and I had 22 years pumping a fair bit of milk around New Zealand, when designing the original infrastructure capacity, very little attention is paid to the possibility of the throughput doubling or even tripling in the future. And when it does, maintenance, operating and capital costs tend to blow out, as we see in many local councils in New Zealand, Wellington and Auckland being two primary examples. When you put the original infrastructure in the ground, it is capable of handling that volume. Anybody that's been involved in the plumbing or the hydrology area, you do not put a bigger pipe in front of a little pipe. It just puts pressure on. Kati and Te Puke have been in the ground for a long time. Just be careful of putting higher volumes through. And there's a report I have here, which I'll leave for you. Finally, the point I would make is and this is in respect to yourself and Tauranga City Council. I hope you realise how privileged you are or better off you are. Given the population growth in the smart growth region and the central government legislation, Taumata Arawai, the reliance on river catchments for drinking water by TCC is highly likely to become questionable in the near to medium term. And I quote the Waiari monitoring and upstream catchment contamination, etc. That although only just commissioned in the last 3 or 4 years, river flows are seriously causing issues there. And Tauranga City is reliant on river catchments. Western Bay is the only solution to any additional water volumes, particularly potable drinking water, out of bore water. Tauranga City have got some major issues. So I think it's logical to join with them, but just be mindful, you don't toss the baby out with a bathwater. You have a good bargaining chip. So in summary, be wary of willing players wanting to join up with you. Bay of Plenty Regional Council and for the Bay of Plenty and the Three Waters Review, it's all well documented, lists the ability of current councils to comply with Taumata Arawai. Take a deep breath. But looking at the bigger picture, right now might be a good time for all councils in the Bay of Plenty to amalgamate and form a unitary authority as the best solution to the three water solution that you're all facing to a greater or lesser degree. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Any questions? Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Weber. Listening to what you've said there, I think was a bit of a mixed message for me. You talked about the negatives of working with other councils in terms of the state of their resource consents, and that's probably not unlike, it's a little bit different, but it's not unlike a whole lot of other submissions we've read that have talked about the debt loading, etc., that Tauranga Council, so there's some negatives there, but you've also talked about efficiencies and savings that have been demonstrated where councils have worked together in other areas. So I'm just trying to understand perhaps where you see the best opportunities for us as a council.
I suppose you just need to read the Three Waters documentation. Waikato District Council, who have done a lot of the similar things, and they've got a common back office structure with yourselves at Tauranga City. Waipaha District Council, but also, and I'm sure you're aware, I know more about the Katikati, as does Peter Mackay, the Katikati outfall pipeline, that there are some issues facing Western Bay up the lift, and you have to accept that. But there are some councils out there that are comfortable having a common back office, as you've done with Tauranga City and using the water care software. Those that have gone that way are good places to go through. But I think there are some real opportunities, and I know based on my dairy industry experience, there is only one sort of management structure looking after all the piping right throughout New Zealand. We have got 74 of those structures in New Zealand. And when you have individual councils having individually designed manhole covers, where we don't have one manhole cover standard for the whole of New Zealand, God be, forgive those who know better.
Thank you. Councillor Murray Benj.
Yes. Thank you very much, Gary. Really appreciated. And you challenged us and you warned us as to the work that we need to do. And what priority would you say is the next step for us? Because you mentioned the quality of the way we get our water and the need to negotiate, and also the negotiations for the medium term of coming together.
You have a very capable lady, or I presume she's still here, Coralie. Just listen to her. There's not many people know more about Three Waters. She is a very capable lady.
We're very pleased to have her.
And
Promise you.
so you should be. And she should be one of the first persons you prepare to lose to go to the new organisation, because she is very capable.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Daly.
Yeah, thanks for your submission, Gary. I just wanted to know, have you had a chance to read the DIA analysis in terms of their advice that they've given to the Bay of Plenty councils, which is basically a follow on from the Three Waters advice, perhaps less the co-governance aspect, and their comments about ring fencing and the fact that, you know, even though a smaller council or one of our neighbours might not be so attractive because of their current situation, potentially under the ring fencing requirements, we can all still be better off.
That is just a staged way. You know, you can either take the big step, or you could take a whole lot of little ones. The problem, in my opinion, with a whole lot of little ones is it'll be like the dairy industry. The smaller councils who cannot afford to do what, they'll be forced amalgamations. So you'll end up with a Potiki, Kawerau and Wakatani all merging together as their first stage before it gets too big for them. You know, all the data was there. The bill is too big for a lot of individual councils to carry. And it's only by having a big ratepayer base to spread the cost, and the costs are not going to go down. You know, you're only fooling yourself if you think the costs are going down. You know, those people that campaign, I'm going to freeze the rates, they're on a different planet to us. You know, the costs are there. So whether you do it quickly or slowly, doesn't really matter. It's still going to be a big cross to bear.
So if I can ask a follow-up. So you've sort of cautioned us against those councils for those reasons, those expired resource consents and the costs coming up the lift that, you know, they don't seem to be acknowledging. Would you recommend I mean, obviously you're suggesting TCC is a good bet, but at what stage do we go for that council Bay Plenty wide CCO, which seems inevitable?
I was talking about a Bay of Plenty wide unitary authority. Wouldn't muck around with the other stuff as well. You know, we're 250,000, or what, 400,000 people when everybody's at home. It's not a big council.
Councillor Joyce, and I think we better move on.
Yep. I'm interested in your dairy industry experience because I agree there are parallels there. So as I understand the dairy industry, you know, some people stayed out and stayed small for a while, and then you end up with two big players, Kiwi and New Zealand Dairy. How did the smaller firms fare? How much influence did they have when they joined the big guys later? Because, you know, it was already, the structure was already in place when they were joining in.
What led to the amalgamations, and you know, the company that I was producing 2% of New Zealand's milk, and New Zealand only produces 2% of the world's milk, so we were a pretty small player.
Depends on how you measure your milk.
When you looked at the capital required to upgrade your plant to be compliant with export standards, you had to find somebody else. So all the mergers happened, and it got to the end. There was Westland, where the Chinese now owned, Tatua, which is the most successful, but also the smallest, and then Kiwi and New Zealand Dairy Group. Yeah. The only option for them was to upgrade.
Right. So my point is, when the smaller ones joined the bigger ones, like the mergers were well and truly underway, how much say did they get in the structure if they joined late?
I think what you find, most of the smaller plants were just shut down because they weren't financially viable. And that's what happened. The plants got old and they couldn't, the cost to upgrade. And I know, like, you'd have a 2 tonne an hour dryer But the modern technology said you had to have a 30-ton dryer and they just couldn't afford it.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's where the analogy with the water sector probably runs out of steam because of rationalisation is limited in the water sector. But okay, I think we'll leave it there. So thank you, Mr. Webber. Great to have your submission and for you to come in. Thank you very much. I note that Danny Simpson's not here yet, so I'm going to ask Mr. Gowdy to come instead. Okay, councillors, let's have not side conversations. So, Mr. Gowdy, great to have you here. You know the rules, so 10 minutes and
well, I'll be a lot less actually. As of the meeting yesterday, the community board did not wish to enter any more detail on their submission, and the other two members, Danny has already told us she won't be here today. The other two didn't want to come, so I'm here to deliver what they have written. That's it.
so, Councillor Joyce.
Are you doing both your personal submission and the community board submission together?
No, I'll do my personal submission after you've dealt with this one.
Okay, so we are, because that's out of order, isn't it? It's just because he was much further down.
I think we'll just let Mr. Gowdy speak now and then we'll take it from there. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got some written material here. If somebody would like to pass this out.
Is that the same material that's in the submission?
No, it's
Okay.
a large extension of.
Okay.
Right. It's 12 copies. And this is also 12 copies of this, 3 things.
So just to clarify, this is the community board submission, is it?
No, there's my own personal submission.
Okay, so there's no more.
From my
There's
community board.
no one's going to speak to the community board submission.
No.
Is that correct?
Well, I have not got permission to alter it or change it or add to it. So it's as is.
Okay, that's fine. So, Mr. Gowdy, I'll let you speak to your personal submission if you can speak now.
Now, somewhere in that heap of papers, I've got my submission and I've given it to a one single page. I need to speak to it. I need to have a copy of it to speak to. That's it. Thank you. Now, if councillors would like to, once they've been distributed,
Okay, Mr. Gowdy.
right. Good morning, Your Worship, councillors, staff, and particularly Miriam, a long time no see. I've been shuffling through, and I have to admit there's one hell of a lot of information that was provided at the beginning, and things have changed since. And I've tried to keep up with what has changed, what is more being explained, and that is why I have a better explanations on the material and some of the processes. A couple of questions I wish to pose to council before I start. Water charges. In the Martin Jenkins report, it didn't have any consumption return. And yet I can find 6.7 million in the water services cubic meters that come into councils for water, which isn't included in the breakdown of income. If that's wrong, well, I'm prepared to be that. But also, is the page 13, the LGFA lending requirements, the alternative approaches that Martin Jenkins taught, is that still viable as a single CCO? And that sort of thing. So have you moved on beyond that? Is it not viable, or is it something you're going to need to think about?
I'll answer that straight away, Mr. Gowdy. The LGFA clarified their lending criteria, so it's a little bit more complicated than the page presented. This page here.
I'm certain it's more complicated. The report on the potentials, good and bad points. Now, the previous speaker actually said, well, there's, these are good points, these are bad points. You need to actually assess what your partners are likely to be and how you interact with them. And the biggest point of joining with other councils is like companies joining with one another. How do they get on? How do they have in common and what propels them? So I haven't seen that report. It may be there somewhere. And then I want to move on to, I'll only just read the headings of mine. I'll let you read it yourself. I'm certain that you've seen like-minded material things, but this is what I found out about, particularly the points of, if you're going to form a CCO and you've got to have a statement of expectations, and that's how you have input into the CCO, because once the CCO's formed, you don't have very much say. You'll get reports. But if you have good information about what you expect to have at the beginning, that is what it is. Now, the most critical task you will ever undertake. There's no room for mistakes, and the process must be clear and transparent. It's about risk and the future of Western Bay District Council. It's so important. If I was sitting in your seats, I would be asking that many questions that it would be unbelievable, because in my mind, you are there to actually make an assessment of those risks and where we go and the path you take. Because I see that you could possibly have a committee in council to pick some officers for your CCO, but the best thing is at the bottom here, I've actually recommended some firms that actually do this for you. Open, transparent, no political motivations. That's clear. So is the CCO completely independent of council? No, it's not, because you have that statement of explanations. But once it gets going, it will deliver. What are some of the insights of how different councils approach this model? Well, they all have different. Well, first of all, you've got to agree that you actually have a common focus. That may be hard in some situations. What insights can help council evaluate these models before making a decision? There's government and accountability, financial stability, operational efficiency, community and environmental impact. What are some of the advantages and challenges of these models, whether it's a council-led process, guidelines and templates by DIA, or collaborative and transparent recruitment? That is a must-have. Can't do it in-house, in my view. What are the key competency areas for board members? Financial management, regulatory and legal expertise, technical operational knowledge, risk management, strategic leadership, and community engagement and stakeholder management. I'll let you read the other bits and pieces there, and the recruitment places again. And I've given you some firms that actually do this. They go, you tell them what you for. There'll be criteria, no doubt, and they will understand who fits that criteria as a professional director. There will be expertise, but there has to be somebody or some people that actually have an overview and can work as a team. Now, if I was in your shoes, I would be looking at every avenue to cross-check who you got, who you're getting, and how do they cooperate and work together as a team. They have to have a proven record. You can't have newbies. And of course, the requirement is no elected members or staff, well, or almost say no previous elected members either. So my view, stay as you are and transfer to a single standalone CCO with the downsizing of the present council operation, because that's what's inevitable. If you go to a CCO, or even you will have to downsize your council operations. And is that clear, and how much? So thank you for your patience. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Cowley. I think first up was Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Ross. You're always very full with your detail and why you are here speaking to us today. You've started with the statement of expectation, selecting a CCO board. We're at the stage where we're looking at who we're actually going to talk to. So when we're looking for partners, we haven't made a decision about it. We're looking at ways of entering into relationships to be able to talk about the business model, and we're led to believe that we have a time where we can opt out. So what my question to you is, Tauranga City, and you've been around for a long time, we know our advantages. What would be the advantage with us, in your mind, of joining with Tauranga City?
If you have a common purpose and a common philosophy and a common work plan, and you may well be able to have a very good fit with Tauranga, as long as it doesn't run over into, because you agreed on this, that you agree on amalgamation, the big A, because that is, in a lot of people's minds, that's what's going to happen. Now, other people may say, well, it's going to happen anyway, but reality, I believe we have tried our best to do our best for our water, particularly our water and sewage systems. They can't be all hooked up to one system, our sewage and stormwater. Well, that's about rating and how much stormwater comes off each individual properties and all sorts of things. And I suggest to you actually do a rating review. But with Tauranga, I don't know enough about Tauranga. I have to admit, I don't know enough about Tauranga's ins and outs to actually say, well, I agree or don't disagree. That's the thing.
Can I ask you then if you have a view on any negatives with joining with Tauranga City?
I think the negative would only be is whether there is a common thread of your supply and in water and in storage and in stormwater that will give you an advantage. I know Tauranga gets water from Western Bay. I know Tauranga processes Omokara sewage, but stormwater, different sort of thing. And what amazed me in the things is they seem to think that every water connection has got a sewage outlet. Well, in Western Bay, that's not the case. And you only have to look at, there's a lot of farms that are connected to and other industries connected to. They don't have surge outlets. So is that a common thing? And then there's the missing $6.7 million out of income you get for water itself, cubic meters of water. Now, if somebody, Adele, could tell me whether that 6.7
No,
million.
Mr. Galloway, this isn't a chance to question staff
Yeah.
on matters. We're here to ask you questions. I would also ask perhaps if elected members could keep it to asking questions about clarification on the submission rather than views of the world sort of situation. Okay, so next up we have Councillor Thwaites.
Morning, Ross. Thanks for coming down. You touch on the composition of the board and going forward. Have you looked much at the Auckland Water Care model? They've run two waters up there for 15 years. I see their last two appointments. They're corporate finance people at the highest level, and they are legal with compliance part. So there's a pool of people out there. Would you be against a director being a director of multiple water entities if they've got that level of expertise and that much experience?
I agree. If they have got that level of expertise, I mean, real expertise, not, well, we've got a degree in this. They've got experience. You need to grab them. You need to grab them now, not in 12 months' time or 2 years' time, because if they have the experience and the time to delve into and understand, they are the people you need, because they will make good decisions on the ins and outs and the commercial viability and the return on income, on revenue and all those sort of things that will help it make it successful. You've got to have a successful, if you go to a CCO, you've got to have a very successful CCO.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gaddy. Next up, Deputy Mayor Scrimger and then Councillor Daly, and then we'll have to move on from there. So, Deputy Mayor Scrimger.
Thank you. Yes, Ross, perhaps following on from Councillor Thwaites' question, you did, I guess, labour the point quite.
I did labour.
Recruitment is very important, and I absolutely agree with you. But you talked about making sure that that process is free from political influence, and you made some suggestions as the sort of companies that we could use to assist in that process. Yeah. What wasn't clear to me was, would you recommend devolving that responsibility to one of those groups to appoint directors or to make recommendations to council?
Make recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Daly.
Ross, just in your final summing up, you say this is the most critical task this council will ever undertake.
Yes.
In light of that, why do you think we had such a small number of submissions and we struggle to get people along to our consultation meetings? Why do you think, is the message just not got out, or are people just not interested, or that just...
It's complicated, as you well know. And to get your head around from, you've had it since the middle of December and you've put it out in March, April, somewhere through there. We've got a month, and I gather this is the only time we will ever have a say as ratepayers. Or there'll be one in October of how you've handled it. But in reality, it is not easy. And I've spent hours looking at this, that, and other, and sometimes I've thought, oh yeah, about this, and then I found some other part of. As the Mayor has rightfully said, the scenario alternatives of a single CCO may not stack up now, but it's at least one of the things that you should be considering. It's part of the options that have been put in front of you. It's part of the package of things that you've got to consider. And I would like to see you as a council actually, in your decision, pointing to these are the things that are most important to you. ratepayers will be further out from the real thing, where ratepayers talk to the council, their community boards and other things. That will be all out now. It'll be talking to a in-house model or a CCO model. And part of your expectations you may well put in that they have some sort of public face. But they are there to do a job, believe me. And they should do a job of delivering to us as ratepayers a better and an up-to-date system. They won't have efficiencies of scale of more than 1 or 2% a year, which of course after 20 years, it does make a difference. The lending rates won't be a hell of a lot difference. So I could never understand why in-house model has got this sort of tag on it and a CCO has less. So I hope that gets explained when we get down to it.
Thank you, Mr. Gowdy. Appreciate your contribution there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I note that our next submitter, Mr. Waterhouse, and also Ms. Rahana aren't here at the moment. So before we go for morning tea, I'm going to ask if he's able to. Mr. Hay, are you able to speak to your submission now? Right. Okay. Councillor Souls?
Mr. Chair, can we just be sure which
Yeah, I'll clarify that.
submission?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Hay. Sorry, can a staff member please assist Mr. Hay on the microphone?
Right.
There we are. Okay, excellent. So before you start, can I just clarify, are you speaking, is this your personal submission or the Ratepayer Association submission?
Yeah, this is my personal submission, and I've also got one from the Ratepayers Association.
Okay, well, why don't you kick off with your personal one and then we'll take it from there.
Sorry, what was that?
If you start with your personal submission and then you can move on to the one from the Ratepayer Association.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Council's decision on what option they choose for future water services will have a huge effect on ratepayers and on the future of council itself. This decision will have a much greater impact than the recent decision on representation. Any bad representation decisions can be reversed in 6 years' time. It may never be possible to reverse any bad decision on what entity is chosen to provide water services. Despite this, our council does not appear to have done any due diligence. They appear to be relying on an analysis carried out by consultants Martin Jenkins and by the Department of Internal Affairs. Martin Jenkins was retained by the previous government to provide analysis in support of Three Waters. The quality of their work has been subject to much criticism. We now know that our council's preferred option is to form a multi-council CCO with Tauranga City Council. The CCO will be a separate entity to both TCC and Western Bay. It will have its own board of directors, which will have to comply with several laws, but it will not be responsible to either councils or any councillors, except to provide them with an annual report. The Martin Jenkins report states, further analysis of the value of a combined entity with Tauranga would require examination of Tauranga's financial position. And they should know because they also did the same sort of work for Tauranga. The primary consideration for Western Bay councillors should be to determine if their ratepayers will be disadvantaged by forming a CCO with Tauranga City. Would they be a good fit? But more importantly, what is their financial situation? The following table, and it's on the handout, compares selected aspects of the two councils. TCC's population and number of rating units is about 2.5 times ours. That should provide them with economies of scale. Tauronga's population density is 35 times higher than Western Bay's, but despite a much larger and much more dense population, their average residential rates are higher than Western Bay's. TCC have a workforce of 1,299 full-time staff, 4.8 times as many as Western Bay, who have 280 full-time equivalent staff. Tauronga's employee cost is 128 million per annum, 3.6 times that of Western Bay. Tauranga City has borrowings of $1.16 billion. This is 10 times more than Western Bay's 115 million. According to ratings agency S&P, TCC is one of New Zealand's most indebted councils. S&P projected TCC's gross debt to exceed 300% of operating revenues by fiscal 2025, and they will be paying interest of over 12% of operating revenue. Local Government Finance Agency has just increased TCC's borrowing limit to 350%. We've been unable to find out what proportion of TCC's total debt is for water infrastructure. However, their 2024 pre-election review states, quote, because the Three Waters activities have a high level of debt as a result of investment in facilities to support growth, such as the Waiari water treatment plant and Timonga wastewater treatment plant, the ratio of debt to revenue for the Three Waters activities is between 400 and 500%. When this is included in council's total debt and revenue, it constrains our ability to borrow for other infrastructure projects needed across the city. TCC will be looking to spread this debt burden as widely as they can. That's why they want more councils, not just Western Bay in their CCO. The Western Bay website states, quote, reality is staying with our current model isn't an option. Even if we wanted to, we don't have the financial capacity to fund what's required on our own. This is where a potential multi-council water organisation comes in. By working together with other councils, we can unlock greater financial capacity to invest in essential infrastructure, ensuring our water services remain strong and future-proofed. But how can Western Bay unlock greater financial capacity to invest in essential infrastructure? By getting into bed with TCC, which has 10 times our debt. TCC is already at its financial capacity, so how are they going to help fund what is required? It is not just Tauronga's financial situation that should be cause for concern. During the time that the Commission was running Tauranga, they sold the Marine Precinct at about $5 million less than valuation. Although the injunction to stop the sale has been rejected by the court, the deal could not have been completed without the assistance of at least some senior staff. But Mayor Drysdale is refusing to allow any investigation. If councils are going to appoint the board members of this proposed CCO, can we trust Tauranga City to vote for people with the required technical, financial and governance skills that will be necessary to run the CCO? And for that matter, can we trust this council to vote for competent people rather than ex-council hacks? Western Bay Plenty District Council, again on their website, we understand concerns about losing local control. That's why this korero is so important. Under a multi-council model, our community will still have a voice. We would be a shareholder involved in setting priorities, selecting leadership, directing priorities, and ensuring our local needs are met. Western Bay might be a shareholder and together with TCC get to select the board, but we contend that council will not have much of a voice beyond that. again quoting the website, our community will still have a voice. Like we had on Maori wards when 78% of residents were opposed, but 9 councillors decided they knew best and voted for Maori wards. Like the last minute decision to have community boards that cover the whole of the ward, left to the last minute so the community would not have a voice. When the consultation document was approved by council, it contained 3 options: status quo, single council CCO, and multi-council CCO. Despite the government requiring that the status quo must be one of the options despite the government requiring that the status quo must be one of the options, council's questionnaire did not even mention the status quo as an option. If this korero is so important, who decided without any consultation that the status quo is not an option? When did the community have a voice on this? We're pleased to see its return to be considered in the consultation. Over the last 10 years, we've been frequently told that the reason our rates have been among the highest in New Zealand was because our Three Waters infrastructure has been maintained in excellent condition. While I've not been able to access historic average rates for Three Waters in Western Bay, I have been able to see how much my personal rates for water have increased over the last 10 years, just a little bit less than 20%. Council is claiming that unless we form a CCO, our water rates will double over the next 10 years. I don't believe that, and I don't accept that we will be better off in a CCO with Tauranga. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. Are there any questions for you? Councillor Thwaites first.
Thanks, Keith. Coming down, you certainly follow our finances much closer than most ratepayers, and you and Ross Gowdy are right up there. Excuse me. Are you happy with the level of reporting we get on the growth portion, being either financial contributions or development contributions? And the second part of the question is, what level of sort of reporting would you want to see from any water entity going forward to handle the growth part and how that falls on people?
Oh, I haven't really thought that far ahead, Don. Sorry. But I imagine if they were professional people, they would report pretty much the same as a public company would report. The board of a public company would report.
Thank you. If there's any time you don't have to answer a question if you don't want to, if you don't feel comfortable answering it.
That was right up as the wheelhouse, that one. But anyway, no, that's fine. So are you happy with the level of information you get now about the cost of growth? Or you can access?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Sol.
Thank you, sir. Thanks again for the submission. The one area, though, we have here, and really what this is about at present is what we are going to go or decide to go with, as opposed to all the fish hooks and other things that are floating around it, which, to be honest, we are no better off than you in many ways, as in, I mean, the submitters, the general public, as to what really, it's a chicken and egg situation. But my question is to you following your last paragraph, and you don't believe in us running with a CCO with Tauranga, is there a preferred option that you see?
I think Rotorua probably has the right idea, and I'll get to that in the ratepayers. Is that okay?
Thank you. Councillor Murray-Benj.
Thank you, Mr. Hay, again, for your quality of the information you've provided. TCC has a debt level that's a bit scary. On the Three Waters, is it just as bad as their overall debt level?
I think it is in view of.
I think it's a little bit unfair to ask Mr. Hay technical questions on a different council's debt.
And the other thing I'd like
financials.
to ask you is the quality of directors is obviously of great concern as well. What do you suggest we do about that?
I think there's quite a big pool of directors who are available. but they might be in quite high demand if all these councils are going to appoint them to CCO boards. But I think the council probably needs to take professional advice on appointing the professionals to these boards. Yeah.
Thank you. Lastly, we have Councillor Daly.
Keith, just noting your concerns about the Tauranga City Council in general and some of their decision making. Would you agree that even though they do get to appoint board members, that the level of competency from any professional director being appointed to a board like a CCO would have to be subject to quite strict scrutiny and likely to be perhaps better than what you perceive to be the current position that they hold?
From what I can gather from the information that we've got, it would be up to the council to appoint the board members of the CCO. But I think council needs to take professional advice on who they appoint.
Yeah, I guess you've sort of pointed the finger at us at being in the same situation where we have to appoint however board members we get to appoint. And so I guess I take your suggestion and also Ross's before you to take professional advice on that. But I think I guess Tauranga City is they just can't appoint anyone.
Sorry, is there a question there,
willy-nilly.
Councillor Daly? Please, it's not a statement of your views.
Yeah. So I mean, your thoughts are clearly you're concerned about that, but there is a level of scrutiny that will be applied.
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you.
You'd have to agree
Councillor Daly,
that
can you make a clear question for Mr. Hay that he can answer rather than a sort of statement of your views?
You'd have to agree that, you know, it's not a hit and miss process, that there was a process to follow and you can't. No, okay, I'll leave it at that.
There may be a process laid down by DIA, but I'm not aware of it.
Thank you. Right. Although it's normally time for morning tea, I think it would make more sense to let Mr. Hay do the Ratepayer Association submission. Are you willing to do that now?
After
Mr. Hay?
morning tea?
Sorry,
Yeah.
now or after morning tea?
I don't mind.
Okay, perhaps do it now and then.
I've just got to get the papers.
Okay, thank you.
In council, okay to start?
Please do, yes.
In council's media releases, brochures, and on their website, they state, under the current model, average household water charges are projected to exceed 4,300 per connection annually over the next 10 years. The literal meaning of this sentence is that charges for each connection are projected to exceed 4,300 every year over the next 10 years. Now, that's pretty scary stuff, but it is misleading. We hope it wasn't deliberately misleading in order to scare people into thinking that a multi-council CCO is the best option. The real situation is that charges are projected to exceed 4,300 per connection in year 10 of the long-term plan. That's a big difference. The Department of Internal Affairs report has a graph, it's item 9.2 on attachment 8, of Bay of Plenty Council's average water services bill per connection, which shows clearly that Western Bay average water services bill will be $7,000 in 2033-34. This is a very serious error. The fine print of the DIA report, Bay of Plenty Water Done Well, investigating the viability of a Bay of Plenty Water CCO, which is dated 24 January 25, states that the document has been prepared to provide information to all the Bay of Plenty councils on the financial viability of a Bay of Plenty Water CCO. DIA has relied on information provided by councils in the development of the analysis and guidance included in this report, including publicly available information from long-term plans and other council accountability documents. It is intended to support council decision-making requirements under local water done well, unquote. Now, Table 1 uses data interpolated from graphs of the average water services bill per connection for each district in the Bay of Plenty for the next 10 years. It shows that if the status quo is maintained, Tauranga water rates will increase by 150%, and Western Bay water rates by 141% over the next 9 years. These are much bigger increases than the other councils in the region, but we can find no explanation of why there is such a big difference. The table also shows that if Western Bay Water Services were in a CCO, water rates would be 3,000 less in 2033-34 than if the status quo was maintained. This compares to 500 less for TCC, 300 less for Rotorua, 100 less for Wakatani, and no difference in Apotiki and, sorry, I've got that wrong. I think it should be Wakatani. We contend that the long-term plan data provided to DIA by Western Bay is not credible. Hauraki District Council's preferred option is to join 6 other Waikato councils in the CCO. The estimated cost to ratepayers in the CCO will be around $4,361 per annum. This is $41 less than the annual cost over the long-term plan for the status quo, which is $4,402. Table 2 shows Western Bay total operating funding for each of the 3 waters for the 24 to 34 long-term plan. The average yearly increase for the first 4 years is 6.6%. It then almost triples to 17.9% for the final 5 years of the plan. There is no explanation for this huge increase. The graphs showing rates for water for all the other district councils are flatter over the last 5 years. Table 2 also shows that total water rates in 2033-34 are $104,372. If average water rates are really $7,000 in the last year of this long-term plan, this means that there are only 14,900 connections in the district. But the 2023-24 annual report states there are 18,651 connections. What number did DIA use? Tauranga appear to want more councils than just Western Bay to join them. One councillor suggested to us that it would be safer if there were more councils in the CCO than just TCC and Western Bay, so that TCC did not have a majority of votes on the board. This would require at least Western Bay, Rotorua and Wakatani to join because their combined household numbers are 67,341 compared to Tauranga's 56,472. And I've used data from the ratepayers report and they use household numbers. So we assume that it's a reasonable approximation to rating units. Apotiki and Kawerau would not be required, but Rotorua appears to be quite happy to go it alone for at least the next 3 years. Table 3 also shows that the smaller councils generally have the lowest debt per rating unit. And this is contrary to council's claim that bigger is better when it comes to local water done well. That's probably contrary to just about everyone's claim that bigger is better. Rotorua's calculations show there is very little difference between in-house, a single council CCO and a multi-council CCO, even after 30 years. Their preferred option is that, quote, water services would be delivered by an in-house council water services division until July 2028. During the 25 to 28 triennium, council would undertake a detailed study of a multi-council water organisation. In late 2026, early 27, council would decide whether it wants to join the multi-council WSCCO, or if not, to transfer water assets in operation to a Rotorua Lakes Council Water Services CCO. This would enable a higher borrowing limit for water services and free balance sheet capacity for other council services. That appears to be a much more sensible approach than jumping into either type of CCO at this time. We urge Western Bay Plenty District Council to do the same as Rotorua. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. Are there any questions on that submission? Councillor Wickers.
Yeah, Keith, thanks for your submission. Just in regard to that last statement you made there, have you considered what position we might be in, say, 3 years down the track, if we decide to join an existing CCO, what our when we go to become a shareholder, the risk that that would present to us and how we would negotiate that?
It has been pointed out to me by a councillor, I think, that joining a CCO down the track further might mean you didn't get as favourable conditions as you would on joining it right at the start. But I think everything seems so uncertain that it's probably a good idea to wait, and you might get as good conditions as you would at the start, but at least you'll know what's going on and be in a better position to make that decision.
Councillor Mybench.
One of the challenges for us is the directors, and you're telling us to go for professional guidance on this issue. If we wait 3 years, will that disadvantage us on the quality of directors that may be appointed by some of the council?
I don't know, but you might be able to appoint directors who have already had 3 years experience. And I don't see any problem with having directors who serve on a number of different CCOs. I think it's probably good that, because they're not in competition with each other, are they? It shouldn't be a problem.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. Taylor. Looks like we come to the end of the questions. So appreciate your contribution and coming here today. So I think we'll break for a morning tea now, and we'll come back here at 11:30. Thank you very much, everyone.
Hello. Good. How are you? I am. Mm. Oh, yes. Yep. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I thought you could hear me and I was talking. Oh, hang on a minute. Hang on a minute.
Okay, we'll carry on with the hearings now. So I'd now like to invite Brett Waterhouse from who's representing the Makatu Community Board to come to the front, please. As I've mentioned at the start of the meeting, you have 10 minutes, and that includes questions. And if you can press the button on the microphone so that it goes red. That's it. Great.
Morning, team. Morning, councillors, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Dinya. Thank you for having me here today to speak on Makatū Community Board's behalf. I've been reading over and writing lots of stuff down, and I'm just gonna fly off the cuff and talk from the heart, team. That's how I'm gonna do my speech. So I may jump around a little bit, but I will get there eventually. Oh, that's a bit better, isn't it? So Makatū, I've been hearing things like, no, that's their problem. We've already paid for that. And that's what they're saying about trying to join with another council. They just think that is the most ridiculous idea ever. We've paid for all our sewage. No one else around us has contributed anything into that. So we're not about to pour into theirs. The biggest part for us is obviously the big thing that's on everyone's tongue, and that's the water. Okay, it's not just something that you can grab. It's the taonga of Makatū. You know, we have all that water under us, and that's what we are willing to protect. We don't want it to just be handed over. We can't have it just gifted out, because we've got lots of room for development around us, and we can't run dry ourselves. You know, we can't feed the big ship. The big ship does need us, but we don't overly need them, because the way that the costings and everything pans out on your assumptions, that's exactly it. It's just one big assumption. You can't even tell us what Makatū Community Board has as a roading fund, let alone this water dream up numbers. So just to touch base on the water quality of Makatū, it's not the greatest. Okay, we've since been on the Makatū Community Board, it has opened my eyes quite a bit. The state of our infrastructure, Makatū, is well behind, and I think a lot of you guys in the room can have a look at yourselves, and you're a part of it. 50-year-old pipes is what Makatū is running our water on, and there's half of the streets are in for a revamp in the 10-year plan, half of them aren't. So we're going to have 80 to 90-year-old pipes feeding our kaumātuas in Makatū this water that we so much treasure. Is it worth feeding the locals, the people through these old asbestos pipes? You know, we've paid for upgrades and maintenance, so our rate of service has been poor. Okay, guys, that's what I'm pouring out about our water lines in Makatū. We haven't received the due service. As we're joining with the bigger council, you know, it's obviously all about money. You know, money. The one thing that on the Makatū little forum, or whatever you want to call it, chat down the whakaue, there was one person that put a little sticker on cost. Okay, cost doesn't mean anything to us. We'd rather the taonga, we'd rather the water than a bit of money. Okay, we don't care how much you guys want to get to borrow or whatever. Water's not for sale. Okay, that's damn straight. To put our valuable taonga over to Tauranga, you know, they're constantly on water restrictions. You know, they've got their big cities already built with all their people. We're building ours. We don't want to put our necessities, you know, water. People are made of 60% of the stuff, so we can't run out of it, or else that's us. We're over. We got the good minerals in the ground around our towns, and we need to look after them. We're not really happy to sign out anything. So our single council water service is what we are supporting, and the hope that you guys can bring our infrastructure back up square, because we do have faith in you guys, but it's just been a little bit blurry over the last 50 years. Just to speak on the cultural input, you know, Tangata Whenua hasn't really had much involvement in this at all. For us to have a consultation and then a week later close it down, that's not really much time for us to even have a read to give good feedback. I feel we needed more time to look over what you guys are trying to say before we could actually deliver some constructive feedback online, offline, whatever you wanted to do. You know, we need to be able to read this stuff. Consistent water service, you know, that's what we're after. We want the water to keep improving and getting better. You know, we're on the downcline. There's people in our town whose animals won't even drink the stuff. Okay, that's what I'm talking about, team. Our level of service has been poor. The community influence, you know, we need to have a voice. just the fact that the consultation was so short, no, that was unjust in its own right. Making sure that the water is safe for drinking, that's obviously the biggest part. And to be even mentioning that Tauranga word around us with this fluoride, no, that's a big no for us. And we don't want that in any of our water. It's good enough as it is. That stuff's poison. And I'll tell you what, there'd be a big uproar if it did. It's a byproduct of fertilizer, and we don't need to be drinking that. The main thing for us also is to see a sustainable approach and to see where and how the transparency is going to show us how you're going to get us good drinking water, when the community influence is going to be, how our consistent water service is going to continue on into the future, and the cultural input. You speak to us, you speak to the kaumātuas, you speak to tangata whenua before you do anything out Makati. That's just how it goes. That's the law. Just transparency. That's probably the biggest thing. You know, these things we're finding out that are far too late. And how the money, how all our money that we've already put into our ratepayers, you know, sure as I'm only a fresh one, but you know, if I owned a house for 40 years and I hadn't seen a drain dug out of Makati, I'd be pretty spewing, because that's the sort of things that we need, team. Our stormwater isn't up to grade. Our water pipes aren't up to grade, and our sewage plant is in a dire need of a makeup. So we do need some serious upgrades to the service, because it is lacking from Western Bay. So for us to go into a single council water service, there is hope that it being a little bit more independent kind of service, we're going to get a bit more attention, as it states in some of our read, that all communities get treated the same. Doesn't matter who you are, where you are, they all get the same level of service. However, we definitely have missed that one. I definitely feel there's no rush to sign over into any kind of deal, as they're only asking for a water plan. Surely you guys can dig up a water plan to keep this thing sustainable. And if not, then you should be looking for some new employees. Just one other thing is just with the touch base on the Tutumu subdivision, you know, that's obviously going to be the next cab off the rack, and that is around our area. How are we going to feed that? Is that storage tapping into us? Is that going to go into the kaituna? Who's drinking water they're going to grab, and who's plugging in the power? No, these are all the ifs, what's, hows, and who's that we need to know. We need to know sooner than later, because it's not good enough getting a week notice. And like Margaret said, during the representation review, there's big change coming, and I'm hoping the big change, guys, is that you guys are going to start listening to the people, because that's what's lacking.
Thank you, Brett. I'll open up for questions. I did want to just clarify that the consultation was open for a month and not a week, so that is important to note. But with that, I'll open up for questions around.
Will be the last forum to have on the
the consultation is open for a month. Obviously, we can't visit everyone on day one, but it is open. It's online. Lots of avenues for you to have that feedback. But appreciate your comments that that council had the in-person event later in that cycle.
So the Whakaui one was one of the last forums you had.
Second last possibly, but yeah.
Okay.
Right, Councillor Murray-Bench.
Mr. Waterhouse, one of the good things that happened to Makatu is the government had a large fund, and we got the last grant, which enabled us to put sewerage into Makatu. No other council, no other group have been able to access that because it's been stopped. So Makatu in that regard has done well, because people couldn't afford to put it in anyway. So, but my question to you is, are you not satisfied with the way council is keeping your community informed?
Well, it's not so much I was listening on, mate. Well, it's not so much informed, it's the big surprises, Margaret. You know, I'm obviously quite heavily involved in the Kaituna River, and yet I just find out about this hydro dam a week ago. That I find out Andy's on the little Kaituna board. So it's just the feedback from our Makatu Te wards don't give us obviously all the things, Margaret, that would be very informational for Makatu. You know, that could potentially alter the whole river flow that's fed into the estuary that goes over our pipi beds. this is significant information for Makati. That's what I'm more talking about, Margaret, is the big projects that we're not knowing about.
Okay. Any more questions? Oh, Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, sir. I read through this before and I saw it, and then you've stated it very clearly again today. So there's two parts or two questions here. One is, and I think I've found out from my learned friends next to me, the situation is the quality of your water at present, you're saying isn't up to scratch, and I gather that could be a pipes issue. So we'll worry about that along the way too. But really I guess we're actually still asking about what we should be doing with what little information we have, which isn't really any more than you have. You haven't said what or if there is any preference here in your submission from the board as to what they would like to see us do. And that is obviously, and we'll go back to a standalone as business as usual, standalone CCO with just us or multi. Have the board got a view on that?
Yes, 100%. We're a single council CCO. We're not looking for anyone else to join up and jump on our back. So I think you guys definitely got the capabilities to do it. It's just a matter of how.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Joyce.
So there's two parts to this from what I see from your submission, Brett. One is obviously you want things to be fixed, which is fair enough. And the things that are working to be maintained, because there's no such thing as we're paid for it, because there's always renewals and things that need doing. But you also said, well, you want a single council CCO, so the control stays local. Which is more important? Because one of the problems we have is we're looking at, well, we're told various things about various models, and I'm not trying to make a decision on the fly, but is it more important that things get fixed and well maintained, or is it more important to have local control?
Well, that's a bit of the chicken and egg, isn't it, my friend? And I'd hands down say it's about looking after the tonga. Keep it in local control, my friend. Infrastructure is expensive. No, I understand you can't go and do a whole town in a day. But I would have thought over 50 odd years, but give a few more fresh pipes in the old line. But I see they've put Ottawa Ave's piping through, so they maybe start being freshening us up a little bit.
Control.
But I definitely think that keeping it in local control is definitely more important, my friend. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've reached the end of the questions, so I appreciate your time, Brett, and you coming in today.
No, all good. Appreciate letting me to speak.
Thank you. So I understand, just to double check, I understand, Mr. Mayo, you're not wishing to speak now, is that correct?
No, I didn't come prepared, so I didn't get a notification. Thank you.
Right, okay, that's right, okay. So next up, because we've already had Mr. Hay, so next up I have Ms. Kane, if you'd like to come up to the front now, please. It's the right-hand button and it goes red. Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor Councillors. Just briefly, I want to speak on behalf of rural people within a rural council who are already totally self-sufficient, meaning no stormwater, no wastewater, and no drinking water. From what I can read online with other rural councils in New Zealand, and especially down Hastings, Hawke's Bay, Heretaunga Council, it's a general assumption, which I don't think is correct, that they will not be contributing to local waters well done because they feel, especially amongst the orchardists around the Pakawai area, that there is no benefit for them because they're already paying for their own bores. And I think there is a lack of understanding at the cost to individual rural people, whether you're farming, your orchardist lifestyles, what it actually costs per household to be sustainable when you're not wanting council drinking water, or you put your own bores down. I think there's a total lack of understanding what the cost is to individual ratepayers. As far as I can see, but there's, we all know there's virtually nothing out there to read. There's been no discussion at government level between councils as to whether this is going to be a mandatory cost or not. There is an article on Google saying the government has said that it's mandatory. I don't know if that's legally correct, but I would like to know. And I think we need more clarity on this issue, because I think there would be a lot of uprising from federated farmers and rural people if they found that if they were totally self-reliant, they wouldn't feel like paying for life. This is not a 10-year deal. This is a forever cost that's going to be on ratepayers. And I can't see how you could do it for 450, 550 annually. To me, that's just petty cash money. I think it's going to end up there within a couple of years, probably $1,000, and then almost an annual increase, because the cost of infrastructure is huge. And it's not just putting down a bore. With climate change and drought, your bore levels drop, and so does the quality of bore water. Now, here's bore water, it's not that easy in New Zealand to have that quality, even with treatment plants. Just on the outskirts of Rotorua, Brunswick, they rely totally on their bore. They cannot make it compliant, and regional council will tell you that they've had to agree that they can have their water as it is. It's not compliant, but each household is going to have a tap and filter. That's how it was, and it was structured with the subdivision when the subdivision was built. They just cannot get that arsenic quality down to what is the high standard required by our government. So it's easy to have this Rolls-Royce system that the government wants, but I think we need more community involvement from between right at government level, because when you go to your MPs and you ask them questions, there is no feedback coming to us. And I think it's very difficult to be honest and be making a submission when we have so little information to go on, other than we're given a cost of around about $550 annually. And I don't think that councils can do it. Your cost of putting down a bore, for some bores, depending on when it's thermal or cold, by the time you've paid for all your connections and everything, $150,000. Then every 10 years, we've got $30,000 to regional council to pay for our consultants. Then we have a power bill of $550 a month. Then we have annual fees to regional council. Now that's just for your drinking water. Those costs don't apply anything to do with stormwater or wastewater. So all the farmers in New Zealand, orchardists, lifestyle people who are on bore water and self-reliant, it is a huge capital expenditure. And it's not tax deductible for some people, but even if it was tax deductible, that is a huge cost. And I can see a huge part of the rural farming, orcharding scene that is going to be like a can of worms later on when we know more from government, whether this is a mandatory cost on us or whether there's going to be some consideration and relief given to those who are receiving no wastewater, no stormwater, and no drinking water. Now, as I see it, we're already paying for supply and treatment. It's mandatory cost at Western Bay, even though we don't receive it. So there's $500 a year, and we just suck it up and pay it. But if we get this landed and it gets up there, and I think it will do within about 2 or 3 years at $1,000 a year, because you're going to have some sort of entity like a regional council sitting over the top that's going to have its chairman, its board, it's going to have a complete infrastructure. It's going to cost a lot of money just in overheads to run it without the cost of putting down new bores, treatment plants, trying to make the whole thing work. And I think we need more help at government level, and it's going to be up to our councils to kick back and ask these difficult questions so we can come back and then say, all right, if we're going to join with other councils, at least join with rural councils, because we have a different concept on what our requirements are from a city council. It might be close to look at Tauranga City Council, but if government says, no, it's not mandatory, then you're going to have some sort of relief and adjustment for all the people who are totally self-sufficient. They'll have to be, it's like the Fair Trading Act. You can't charge for what you don't receive. And you don't mind if it's 1 or 2 years, that's your contribution. It's like a charity. But knowing this is a life committed, 30, 50 years, I don't think it will ever go away. We need to look at the anomalies which are currently sitting there in this system. So can I just leave it for you to think about the rural side where I feel there hasn't been enough questions and challenge at government level about whether this is mandatory or not?
Thank you, Ms. Kane. Can I just clarify, because there's a number of issues here. There's a mandatory side in terms of adhering to standards, which Taumata Arawai
Yes.
will enforce. And then you're suggesting that you're being charged for services you won't receive, which isn't the case now, and I don't believe will be the case going forward either. So I'm not sure about this.
I rang council the other day just out of interest, and it hasn't worried me up to now, but because I wanted to see what was mandatory to do with treatment supply, I rang just as courteous to ask, and they said, oh, that's a mandatory cost. So I just left it at that and didn't have an argument. But that's when I took that away to think further down the line. And that's when I went online, and it was only on Google, so I don't know if it's a legal statement, but the government has said that the cost for Three Waters local water well done will be mandatory on all ratepayers. So I just tucked that away and thought, is that a legally true statement? I don't know.
I think Councillor Thwaites is.
Bev, I'm happy to step in and help you because you're taking the word mandatory completely wrong. All these properties up here forever and a day in the back of Pie Spa, Ohaui have no water, no wastewater, no stormwater. They get no bill. They are not going to get a bill. It is not mandatory to them. It is mandatory on councils to meet these standards.
Yes.
About public water supplies. But all those properties, all those rural properties you're so worried about, they're not affected at all. And ironically, in a big chunk of New Zealand, the central part of New Zealand, it's become so expensive, they've actually started charging those properties who are not connected to actually help subsidise their towns. Kaihape is supported by the farmers. Te Kuiti is supported by the farmers. We haven't gone there yet. I mean, gone there, but this is what to avoid that from happening, to make it more work so it doesn't. So I think you've taken the mandatory part completely wrong. It doesn't apply to everyone. It only applies if the pipes are there. You would have to pay a half charge if you don't choose not to connect and it runs outside your place. That's been standard operating system for a long time. But certainly properties who aren't connected won't incur any charges.
So what about, Dom, when the pipes go past hypothetically for drinking water, but we choose not to use council
you get
water?
charged an availability charge.
It's availability charge.
For years, yeah.
But do you honestly think with the cost of this new structure, which is a good idea, I agree with it, we've got to do something. But to me, I can't see a day ever coming when we will not be exempt from that cost. I think it will get inflicted on us. I just think that's the nature of the beast.
Right. Looking for further questions, I see Deputy Mayor Scrimger, or if you wanted it. Okay.
Okay. And thank you, Don.
Don't feel the need to repeat questions or clarifications already. Councillor Murray Benchley.
Bev, if, for example, a rural orchardist is supplied by a council supply, then they pay, and they are required to meet the standards that the regulator puts on them. We know at this stage that there is no issue with the rural community. We don't know, and that's your question for your politicians. At the next stage, will the rural community who supply for several properties, will they have to comply in any way? And it's a really good question that you make, and I think it's one that our politicians have to answer, because it's not in this round, but it could be further down the track.
I think we have the answer to that, Margaret, because if you're supplying any neighbour, then you must comply with that standard.
No, the rules on that have changed. So you now have to supply, it used to be supplying anyone but yourself, and now it's moved up to a much larger number. I'm going to say 20, but it's something like that. Yeah. Anyway, I have Councillor Granger.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Beth. I just wondered if you could explain your last statement in your written submission as to how you've made that assertion that no government is going to prosecute a local body if not all water infrastructure has
Sorry,
been.
Murray, I'm struggling to hear because I have partial hearing. I'm really sorry. Could I ask you just to...
Your last statement in your written submission says no government is going to prosecute a local body if not all of the water infrastructure has been updated over a certain period of time.
Well, I just don't
where's that
think they'll
coming from?
spend the money to start prosecuting people. I think it'll just have to be done as it's affordable by any council, because when you've got money in the petty cash tin, whether you're going to be given money from the government or not, what you haven't got, you can't do, Murray, and I can't see government going to rush out there and prosecute any individual council.
They've made it very clear that they will prosecute people who don't fluoride $200,000. So
yeah, no, I will make it clear. The government we've been too much otherwise been clear. There will be prosecutions if you don't get it in time, and that is exactly why this local water done well reform is happening, because you will no longer be acceptable to say, "Oh, we just don't have the money." So that's been clear from the government and Taumata Arawai. So
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, appreciate your time. Thank you for coming in. Okay, next up I have John Clements on behalf of the Katikati Community Board.
Thanks, Bev, for leaving the light on. All right. Thank you very much for your time, Mayor and councillors. I'm representing the Katikati Community Board. The council's decision on what they choose for the future of water services will have a huge effect on the ratepayers and the future council itself. This decision could lead to the Western Bay of Plenty towards further integration with Tauranga City Council. It could lead to significant restructuring, as 40% of its revenue is under debate. The parameters regarding the decision seem to change from 2 or 3 options for water done well. It was 3, then 2 for consultation, and the latest documents show it is back to 3. The community board has had to assume that there are now 3 options on the table, but I do think that in fact the consultation should have had all 3 included in that consultation process. The community board has researched the issue of the big increases between the in-house and one council CCO, and has difficulty understanding the 80% difference between these 2 options, when the only difference is the organizational framework. Finance costs and growth do not explain an 80% differential. That is from 2,700 to 4,880. The council proposal implies that there is no development contributions, financial contributions applied in the in-house options, and the local government financial authority limited this application. The community board has been in contact with both the Water Services Authority and the Minister of Local Government and has reviewed the legislation. And in all the structures, financial contributions can be applied. The major issue is risk management and debt limits. The Cabinet, when it made this decision, just wanted to extend the same rules to all organisation structures and allow local decision-making. The Cabinet papers are on our research and can be read through the links which I will provide. We would appreciate if the council could explain the differential if the lack of financial contributions is not the cost driver, as this seems to be the only reasonable explanation for such a big differential. In council, and therefore this really puts the consultation process on a biased footing. In council's media releases, brochures, and their website, they state, under the current model, the average household water charge is projected to exceed 4,880 per connection annually over the next 10 years. We don't think it's correct, but it is confusing. Just worded to scare people into thinking that a multiple council CCO is the best option. And let me say that, in fact, I've received many phone calls and contact with people wanting to move out of the district when they see $4,880 just for water, because I think that is what you are implying. Council also claim with a multi-council model This drops to 2,440 per connection, a 50% reduction. If the council goes for a single council water services CCO, then the connection drops to 2,700. We were informed this decrease is due to the government financing costs and growth. Our calculations indicate the financing would need to be significantly more expensive, and growth on average is 1%. So this is not a reasonable explanation. It can only be driven by the financing costs. And why does this not apply to Rotorua? The question is, why would the in-house solution cost 80% more than Western Bay Plenty Water Services CCO when they are offering the same services to the same rate papers, just under a different organizational structure with higher overhead costs? And I want to emphasize that. We've talked about the directors, we've talked about a new CCO, so you're going to have higher overhead costs in any CCO, but yet it says it's cheaper by 50%. It needs some explanation. We recommend the council follow the Rotorua option that shows there is a very little difference between the in-house, a single council CCO, and the multi-council CCO, even over their 30 years. Their preferred option is that the water services would be delivered by an in-house council water services division until July 2028. During the 2025-28 triennium, council would undertake a detailed study of a multi-council water organisation. In late 2026, early 27, council would decide whether it wants to join the multi-council water services CCO, or if not, to transfer water assets and operations to a water services CCO. This would enable a higher borrowing limit for water services and free balance sheet capacity for other council services. We think that's a good recommendation. The Martin Jenkins report states further analysis of the value of a combined entity with Tauranga would require examination of Tauranga's financial position. I compliment Gary Webber on saying that, in fact, we should also look at their resource consents, because that would also have a significant bearing on the transfer. We all know, based on press releases, that TCC's financial position is well known and has very high borrowing costs. And we've seen today, it's not very efficient. The report is also based on the current long-term plan, which has been described as ugly, and the numbers are questioned by some councillors. The community board believes that council should opt for services to remain in-house until there is a thorough due diligence as per the Martin Jenkins report on TCC, and the financial contributions are included in the calculations. This should then be taken back to consultation. We repeat, we would appreciate if council could explain the differential if the lack of financial contributions is not the cost driver, as this seems to be the only reasonable explanation that we can find. We contend you are making a decision based on incorrect information, keeping the services in-house until more diligent analysis of the information has been undertaken, as appears to be a much more sensible approach than jumping into any type of CCO at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. I will just clarify one aspect. Look, financial contributions are certainly not the only driver here, but it was clarified, or the covenants provided by the LGFA in mid-April, that for our number, it's the amount of financial contributions you can put into your revenue line is dependent on the number of connections. And for us, we could only take 50% contribute. 50% of the FinCos, and if we join with a larger council like Tauranga, we could take 75% and it's only if you're in a CCO as well. Yeah, so that's part of the explanation. I just wanted to clarify that, and it was something that came in halfway through our consultation. So it is a moving situation. Okay, with that, I'll ask, I recognise Councillor Murray Benj and she can ask a question.
Thank you, sir.
Then, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for your explanation. Then where's the new modelling and where's the new costing? Because if you're correct, and I'm not doubting you are correct, but then you've gone to consultation without that information being available.
It's a moving feast. There's always partial information in these situations. We haven't got a definitive list of which councils we might join with. So to try and go into that level of detail at this point is not actually practicable. But Councillor Murray Benj, if you'd like to ask a question.
Well, sir, you answered the first question that I was going to make, but what is your opinion on a professional director?
Well, obviously, and I've heard the earlier discussions. Thanks, Margaret, for your question. People say, well, there are lots of directors around. The answer is there aren't. There's a limited pool of leadership. Part of the problem is that, in fact, New Zealand doesn't have large corporations, and many of them in the public sector, and therefore the expertise on running organizations with 500 million to $1 billion worth of assets is actually fairly limited. The other one is that, in fact, you need to draw up a matrix of competences that you require, whether it's financial, technical, operational, strategic thinking, and select on that basis. You've got to determine what you need. You do need professional directors because they will go off the rails. Any organization is influenced by leadership, and therefore poor governance means poor outcomes.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Clements? Yes, Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour.
Yeah. Sorry, John, I'm just trying to recollect what you said at the end of your presentation. Could you confirm for me that you said something like council's considerations are based on incorrect information or something like that? Is that what you said?
Well, yes, I did say that, because you haven't included the financial contributions when you're looking at your in-house model. Therefore, your costs of water at 4,880 is not the right number.
Okay, thank you for that. Could I ask you then about your written submission here? The last sentence you've written here says TCC water charge is 60% higher than Western Bay Plenty District Council. Could you explain how you calculated that?
That was in your, we actually looked at TCC numbers when we were doing some benchmarking.
Based on the numbers I've just done here, if you're a low water users, your charges are considerably lower for Tauranga City. It's only when you get, up to around towards 300 cubic meters a year that your charge becomes higher than ours. So there's a lot of Tauranga ratepayers, whose water charges are lower than ours.
Yep. And that once again, it's the best of the calculations. Yep. Thank you.
No more? Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Clements.
Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. So I think, well, since we had a late tea, I'd like to have at least one more before we go to lunch. And Peter Lockhead, are you able to present now? Go for it. Okay.
Anything else changes?
So I note you're here to talk in two roles, one for Te Puna Heartlands and one for, I guess, Lockhead Design or on your own account. So,
well, no, one's for Te Puna Heartlands and one's for myself.
Yeah. Okay. So if you want to start with Te Puna Heartlands, and we'll take it from there.
Collectively do them both together because they're pretty similar.
Okay.
I haven't written down my verbal submission because it'd be a waste of time, because by the time I finish it, like the rules that are coming from government to you guys and then from you guys to us, they're changing as well all the time. What I would like to get my head around and understand is who's driving this? The government comes out with a wonderful counter to Three Waters, and then puts what I can see puts pressure on all local bodies to sign up. And to sign up, if you're good people, we'll give you some money. Has anyone asked where the government is going to get that money from to pay all these new identities that are going to get set up? As we've learned, there's a whole lot of people going to get re-employed to be directors of this new water identity. And the cost of that, does that come out of the council pool or the money that the government's going to give you?
The government are not going to give us any money. That's quite clear. So that it'll be.
It comes out of the council pool.
It'll come out from. Just won't. It'll come out from the water service organisation, either as debt or directly paid for by, well, ratepayers, customers, should we say?
So the ratepayers get stung for paying for more people, or do the councils throughout the country give up their water engineers and their stormwater engineers and their foul water engineers to go work for this new identity? And they get set up in a new separate office again.
Yep.
So it's just another repeat. And yet the government's telling us that we've got far too many local bodies now. And that's why they're doing the study on how successful the super city was when they amalgamated that 15 years ago. My next concern is when you see all these reports done, it's mainly concentrating on the drinking water. And I know no one wants to get involved too much with all the other waters because it's not a nice thing. But with the stormwater, when we do a subdivision, all stormwater from the hard fill areas like roofs, driveways, etc., gets piped away. Nothing goes into the ground. And then we supply that house with water, treated in some cases, shortly to become fluoride. There's no encouragement for the people to catch the water off their roofs and put it into the ground to keep the water table at a reasonable level, or to put it on their gardens so they're not having to pay for treated water. And yes, the sections are getting smaller, but you can now have a fence, a boundary fence, which is a water tank. None of these calculations have factored that in to the water usage. And we understand that rural areas, a lot of the rural properties don't have water connections, as Bev has said. They deal with their own sewage. They deal with their stormwater. The one water that no one has mentioned, and the government is the driving force behind this scenario, is coastal water, inundation water. Because I believe, and the Heartlands people believe, it's inundation and stormwater are the two major problems. The other ones, if you deal with them in respect of stormwater to household improvements and encouragements, it takes the pressure off the supply of the drinking water from the council. It won't be needed as much. And it gives the people the choice to water their veggie garden or their flower garden without fluoridation in their water. And I suppose finally, I just think this has been rushed to get through with, and it's making it difficult for you people around the table to make a decision because the rules are changing all the time. Documentation's changing all the time. So I suggest you push back to the government or whoever's written this document to get started and tell them to pause. Get their facts right, get their calculations right, but don't just lump us all into one, because this whole thing was driven out of Wellington City's problem, and they can't afford to fix up their problems, so all other people are going to get lumped into their configuration. So if you keep on accepting all their changes, you're never going to make a logical, balanced decision because you're going to get caught out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lockhead. I see Councillor Coxhead.
Thanks, Peter. You actually asked some really good questions and you raised some really good points. I noticed you mentioned this a couple of times and also in your submission, the use of fluoridated water for irrigation. Did you just want to expand on that at all?
This really isn't about fluoridation, Councillor
No,
Coxhead.
but it was mentioned in his submission.
Well, we know that all councils are being mandated to put fluoride in their water. And the evidence that I've received is that it would possibly kill more flowers and veggie plants than it would encourage to grow.
I do want to clarify that has nothing to do with this decision we're faced before us now. Are there any other questions for you? Okay,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and thanks for coming in. So with that, I think we will break for lunch now and be back for say 1 o'clock and further submitters. Thank you. Right. Thanks, Brett. Okay. Okay, we'll start off this afternoon's session. And first up, we have Bay of Plenty Regional Council, who I understand is being represented today by Councillor Ken Shirley rather than Kat McMillan. So Ken, it's floor is yours. If you can press the button, it goes red when you're live, opposite way around to Regional Council.
Yeah, we're green when it's live.
Exactly, yeah. So 10 minutes, including questions, and so in your own time.
Thank you, Mayor Denyer, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Regional Council submission on the Water's Done Well. Ours is a very brief, high-level report and commentary, so I won't take long at all, but very happy to field any questions. And of course, many of us were at the meeting in Rotorua yesterday. But essentially, the Regional Council has a clear policy that it's really not our swim lane from an operational point of view, and we're very mindful not to have opinions on what various territorial authorities might decide, and what is quite a challenging task for you all. But we have been drawn into it in terms of the stormwater aspect, both in terms of upper catchment management also, but it's in fact the legislation is still not clear with regard to where that overlap will be between territorials and regional councils and some of the stormwater aspects. So our main submissions have been through to Ira Kahika, which is the national body for regional councils, seeking clarification on that point. So you'll have our submission in front of you. As I say, it's very brief, very high level. The first point we make is really just the outcomes of the mayoral forum, and we of course are part of that, so you'll be all very familiar with that, so I won't spend any time on that. And the second part is the strategic direction and community outcomes of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and these are tied to our strategic direction and several community outcomes of the long-term plan, 24 through to 34. And there's the 5 bullet points there: health, environment, future-ready communications, connected and established communities, and sustainable development, and the pursuit of excellence. So you could say it's motherhood and apple pie, but it's high level important stuff, and we would like to think we can support the various territorial authorities in the region and work with you in achieving these goals that we all aspire to. So I'm happy to leave it there and answer any questions. Should any councillors have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shelley. Are there any questions? I see Councillor Daly.
Ken, you mentioned stormwater, but can you explain a bit more from regional council point of view exactly what your responsibilities are to stormwater and what the division between between territorial authorities and regional council?
Indeed. Anything in the pipes is clearly the territorial authority. So we're not in the business of pipes. But as you'd appreciate, you require consents to discharge out of those pipes back into the natural environment. Same with the catchment where you take your water from. We manage the water of the catchment. Once it goes in the pipe, it's yours, but we receive it at the other end. Same for sewage too. But then, of course, you get increasingly the establishment of wetlands as part of the stormwater management, which is a good thing. And there's quite a grey area in terms of those managed wetlands that are an integral part of the stormwater. Does that sit with the territorial authority, or does that sit with the regional council, and which part of it? Because in some of the coastal areas, we've actually purchased farms to create deliberate wetlands for various purposes of drainage and flood attenuation. So this is the grey area that we are seeking clarification with the pending legislation that's still evolving.
And if I can follow up, So we had Gary Webber giving his submission this morning, and he warned about Tauranga City's water supplies being surface-based and some of the issues coming down the streams affecting the the intake to their supplies, and saw that as more problematic for Tauranga City than for us with our deep bores. But and even yesterday there was talk about the water flows to water supplies from the environment, and how that is likely to be regulation is going to tighten up on that as well. Have you, I guess you're still waiting for those regulations as well?
No, I think the water quality regulations are pretty well specified now. But you do get in some catchments deteriorating water quality. Even in what would appear to be pristine catchments, you can get quite a lot of E. coli with mammals, deer, goats, possums. So you really need an integrated catchment approach to ensure long-term water quality.
So I think it's always been a bit difficult for us when it comes to like big weather events, in terms of the delineation of responsibility for the streams and rivers that run through the towns, and where Western Bay starts and where regional council picks up, and the climate resilience and adaptation requirements going forward. We've seen some, Cyclone Gabriel and the effects of that.
Yeah.
Have you got any thoughts on that?
Oh, it's a very difficult area, and it's one that's getting more complicated. And we have another number of very good examples in our region. I think the Te Puke area is a classic, where it's a natural low-lying area, a lot of urban development, and a lot of floodplain areas that is well farmed but also be flooded. So the whole integration of the Kaituna River with that broader environment is quite a challenge for us all. And you'd be aware of the problems we have with some of the industrial wastes of urban development, from industrial development, and some of the issues there. So it's our whole consenting regimes and how they interact and work with each other between the territorial authority responsibility and the regional council responsibility. And the last thing we want, because we're all serving the same communities, is that we pass the buck between the two of us. So I think we have to. It's very important that we do work together closely to make sure that we're not seen by the communities just passing the buck on some of these real problematic issues that we jointly confront.
I think that sounds like more of an issue to have a chat over coffee rather than in the hearing, which is about a slightly different issue. So I'm now going to go to Councillor Murray-Pinch.
Thank you, sir. My question is, we heard yesterday I asked the question about gold plating by the water regulator, and I wasn't there long enough to hear the reply. But one of the panel members told me to make sure I asked it. So can I ask you, in your network, is there a piece of legislation to alter in any way the water regulator? Do you know?
Oh, no, the regulations are approved. Government has set up a water regulator, and they have come down with regulatory requirements. And as local government are bound by that.
Right.
I'm conscious. Councillor Shelley here is here to answer questions about the submission and not sort of respond to government legislation as a whole. So just keep it a little bit more focused.
My second question, sir, is we had previous mayor made a submission before and talked about the need for amalgamation coming. Is there a need for the regional council in the future?
I think this is getting outside the submission we're looking at.
We haven't got enough time for me to answer that question, Mayor, but I have strong views in that regard, but I think it's probably not related directly to this hearing and our submission. And I think we all have strong views on that subject.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Councillor Shelley. I see Councillor Ray's now got a question.
Thanks for your submission, Ken. I'm just looking through the goals that are listed here, and I just wanted to ask, are you concerned at all with the government's parameters of what a CCO looks like Are you concerned that goal 9 and goal 18 may not be able to be achieved? Because one reason I ask is that goal 9, fostering strong communities, I really want to commend the Bay of Plenty Regional Council in that space.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact that in Makitu, for example, they don't do anything out there unless they've talked to us and we have come to an agreement. And so I would really hate to see those things disappear.
I think you make a very good point there, and it's the challenge that we all face again in local government, because water's done well is a centralisation process, and that's not necessarily good or bad, but and there's always that tension between centralism and localism at the community level. And too many of us think of that as a binary choice, whereas I believe you actually, and I think the view of the regional council, I should say, is that you actually can and need both working in harmony. In other words, you might have greater centralism for economies of scale, availability of high-level competency and technical skills and financial access on certain topics, like we're being directed with Water's Done Well, but at the same time, that must never be at the expense of alienation of local communities. So we've got to, in all of our endeavours, and this is the regional council's aspiration, to ensure that where we see centralisation for the right reasons, it's not at the expense of fostering localism and communities. And the two can go together and must go together.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shirley. I think that brings us to the end of the questions. So thank you for your time and thanks for coming to talk to us. Thank you.
Right.
Next up, I have Mrs. Joan Dugmore. So if you'd like to come up, Mrs. Dugmore.
Do I stand here?
You can sit or stand, but the microphone is on, and the one that's red is on, so you might as well use that one.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'm an old girl at this, but I'm going to have a go at it. I'm very mindful of water, sewage and stormwater in our area, and I don't know much about Cadicat and Waihi Beach Bar, nor all about Te Puke. I'm going to read what I've written. We are very mindful of all the information that I have managed to collect, but I'm sure there would be protection info somewhere on the natural resources of this country. Western Bay is already made up of other councils, and it's a big area with plenty of water and horticulture, a lot with their own water and sewage schemes. They do not have sewage from Te Puke or their water. There are in-house options, which I would be in favour of. Western Bay would be far better on its own. Bigger is not better. There's plenty of water and we have had access to it. The subdivision where I live was on the number 2 road supply, beautiful water, where a lot of rural people are still on or got access to. Number 3 road and the Raymond Dam, access to Waihi years ago, we had some water from Waihi for Te Puke because something wrong with our water at the time, where the pine trees fell down and we had brown water. Tauranga have taken water from a spring in the Waihi River down below Te Puke's bore and piped it into a reservoir from Papamā, where 90% of the people were against it and have a big debt. We cannot see any benefit in joining TCC, as our area and land have different needs and focus. We are rural, some have septic tanks, some have their own water, and we're a horticultural farming community, and so is Cadicat and Waihi Beach. All councils I'm talking about the sewage now, all councils were able to get loans from government to put their sewage schemes in and pay it back within 10 years. But it wasn't paid back within 10 years. Councils don't do that. So we're all still carrying the debt. This was for the community, but in Te Puke, some rural organisations were allowed to pipe to Te Puke, which overstretched our sewage scheme.
We've been now told we have 10,000 people coming to live here at Te Puke, and we have not got the infrastructure, the schools or anything else. We've got more buildings going on, of course, in wetlands where there's always been flooded. Same with Papamā, all underwater. So, and a lot of houses in Te Puke have been built step by step where they're getting each other's water, and a lot of concrete that creates a lot of storm water, flooding people's properties. All this concrete needs to stop. No concrete drives or anything like that if you've got people down below you. Te Puke joined the amalgamation with Waihi and Caricat, and it's been an absolute disaster for Te Puke and Caricat. Big's not better, and people can look after their own community if they like. Te Puke's got a big area, horticultural area, very rich area, but the money's not coming to the town. We've got far too many people living in our area and not enough infrastructure. We do not think joining Tauranga City is a good idea, as Tauranga would dominate the organisation. Our water infrastructure is in a far better shape than theirs, and Te Puke is called the water. Te Puke TCC is not in a very good financial shape. There was funding given to our area from the Growth Fund from New Zealand First, and where economic development intercepted for the Rangiora Park, which could have gone on towards the growth of Te Puke. I think councils need to get rid of all the people like Smart Growth and Priority One, ripping them off, and get back to their budgeting. Thank you. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Duggan. Are there any questions for her? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, and I appreciate your contribution and for coming in. Now I have the Amokura Residents and Ratepayers Association, Dr. Bruce McCabe, John Palmer and Kathleen McCabe. Are you all speaking together, or how are you? So you've got 10 minutes, including questions between you. So however you want to divvy that up, that's up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Due to the real gravity of the decisions being made on this issue, we've got three speakers: myself, Kathleen, a retired Queen Street lawyer, and John, a former district councillor. Now, I'm Dr. Bruce McCabe. My background is I was an environmental consulting engineer for over 30 years in the areas of resource consenting, stormwater, wastewater, and potable water. My doctorate is in geochemistry. Local water done well is a legislative requirement, and given the financial incentives, the current council indebtedness, and the projected spend on water services, council has no choice but to be a shareholder of a water CCO delivering potable water, sewerage, and stormwater services. The financial modelling provided by the council shows that the cost of water services will increase over the next 10 years. It also shows that there is no demonstrable financial benefit to consumers from the number of councils coming together to form a water CCO. That is, the modelled savings to consumers are within the margin of error of the modelling. The challenge then is to undertake the formation of a CCO in such a manner that the outcome is the least worst outcome for Western Bay ratepayers. That is, the option that poses the lowest financial risk to ratepayers. This will require council to undertake due diligence and risk assessment and management to identify what, if any, council they should join with to form a water CCO. As stressed in the Martin Jenkins report, due diligence needs to be done before any decision is made to form a multi-council CCO. In the absence of adequate due diligence and risk assessment, a single council water CCO will likely be the best, in other words, the lowest risk option for consumers, as the risks within this council should be well known and understood. So what needs to be considered? The board selection process is critical. As a small council, there is a risk that a larger council will dominate the selection of board members. Personal preferences, not professional competence, may prevail where board members are recruited by councillors. These risks can be minimised by engaging a professional recruitment consultant to provide a short list of suitable board members, with the final interviews and selection being made by a subcommittee comprising water engineers from the councils concerned. Such a process will also satisfy the government objectives of keeping water services management at arm's length from councils and delivering these services using an efficient commercial model. It will be necessary to ensure that the CCO has a professional board to ensure that it is able to access debt funding from the local government funding agency. The charter needs to be considered and it has to be agreed between all parties before you proceed. And financial risks of potential parties needs serious consideration. Such things as present day debt to income, projected costs and debt requirements, and how these will affect water charges. So identifying the option that with the lowest financial risk of the CCO options being considered, the financial risk of a single council CCO will be the easiest to identify and will likely be to the lowest financial risk to ratepayers. This can be used as a reference point to determine whether the risk assessed for a multi-council option being considered. A multi-council option should only be adopted if it can be shown that the financial risk to ratepayers of this option is less than that of a single council CCO. So in summary, the formation of water CCO will be the most significant decision you make as councillors. The government has legislated what it wants, but it has not provided advice on how to go about it to provide the best outcome for the people you represent. Collectively, you don't have the commercial expertise to undertake this process with a high level of confidence. So I strongly recommend that council obtains professional advice before and throughout the process to establish a water CCO in order to achieve the best outcome for ratepayers. Thank you. Kathleen?
My background is I was a lawyer practicing in environmental and commercial law until my retirement. I was also formerly a director of several companies, including NZDL, a 337 million independent dairy processing company. I was also a business manager of an electricity utility and retailing company when several municipal electricity entities were merged at the time of the 1990 electricity reforms. It is this latter experience which I wish to discuss, as I believe it may have some insights and parallels which may be valuable to councillors as you go through a very similar reform process in relation to the council's water utility operation. The proposed water services structure and reforms are far more prescriptive than the initial electricity industry reforms. Despite the more freewheeling nature of the electricity industry in the 1990s, the constituent councils of these electricity utilities had what amounted to zero control of the newly formed electricity entity, much as I believe they will have over the to-be-formed water services utility. The main arbiter of pricing, inclusion of assets and financial modelling, and resultant electricity pricing is the sole domain of the Commerce Commission, which I will short F to refer to as ComCom. The reasons for this lack of control are set out very clearly in the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act 2024, which is the guiding legislation in this regard. These are: 1, ComCom must approve and or amend the water services delivery plan for all 3 waters, and these are potable, water, wastewater and stormwater, which you as a council must prepare. All financial decisions are determined solely by ComCom, including the assets valuations and the concomitant return on assets, which leads to ComCom being the sole arbiter of all pricing, whether for a sole utility or any co-joined utilities. ComCom can interpose itself or its recommended individuals or panels on the water services utility as it sees fit, virtually overriding any board appointments at ministerial discretion, although that ministerial discretion is obviously informed by the Department of Internal Affairs. Ministry for the Environment can set any environmental constraints to be policed by the Regional Council. Ministry of Health and Taumata Arawai will determine potable and other water standards. If councils determine that they wish to amalgamate their water utilities, there has to be adequate prior consultation on the specific of that amalgamation according to the legislation. And this has to be backed by financial and all other information, which must also be prior delivered to ComCom. This has not happened. While the councils, or hopefully their human resources consultants, must appoint a board, the councils cannot fetter their discretion as the board members are also subject to the Companies Act. Nor can these directors override the dictates of the industries I have discussed previously. Key appointments are the CEO, which must be a water engineer or particularly a water engineering consultant, and the board. The chairman of the board must have a significant financial and commercial background, and the other board members must include an experienced commercial lawyer and others with a water services background. I stress that your chairman should not be a lawyer, being one myself. It is always a recipe for disaster, and I can discuss that if you wish. It is my opinion that the very worst appointments are people with a local body background or people appointed on the basis of some form of identitarianism, i.e. gender, race, disability, or non-local do-gooder, as these people will be completely out of their depth and or counterproductive. In my experience, we all fall back on our experience, and local body politicians do not have the requisite commercial experience or discipline, and are thus too prone to wasting time and resources with vainglorious grandstanding. I apologise if anyone is upset. Council will continue to receive revenue from rates as all the utilities assets are subject to rates takes. However, it would be prudent to form a locally elected trust to make appropriate distributions of any returns to the local community. The model in this regard is probably ticked in relation to the electricity industry. As the entity is subject to the Companies Act as well as the relevant Local Governments Act, the directors have a statutory duty to act in the best interest of all the shareholders. That means all the councils, and not just Western Bay, and with whom else they may be amalgamated. Council has a role in a statement of shareholder intent. This is a legislative requirement. This, however, will be a statement often referred to in America as a motherhood, apple pie, and God statement, i.e. platitudinous feel-good remarks that have absolutely no basis in fact. And I'm sorry if I've upset anyone. Summary of common misconceptions. The water delivery plan may exclude one of the three waters, particularly stormwater. This is untrue. Council will control the utility as if the reforms and its relevant act had not been passed. This is untrue. There can be council-determined geographical pricing if two or more water utilities are amalgamated. This is also untrue. Council can determine the pricing after the event. This is also untrue. If two or more utilities are amalgamated, the directors will represent the former council water utility and not the newly formed entity in its entirety. This is also untrue because you're subject to the Companies Act, where you cannot act disparately in terms of your shareholders. I think in part, these misunderstandings have occurred because of the name council-controlled entities. And I think it's better in that regard to look at the former legislative requirements, which called them LATEs, Local Authority Trading Enterprises. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. So can I clarify there? You seem to be trying to rebut some kind of FAQ. Is that?
Pardon?
You seem to be trying to rebut some FAQs or some statements that have been made elsewhere.
I had a look through all the submissions that you had made, and there was a common theme that council continued control after the event, which is simply not true.
That's your opinion. Thank you. Any questions for the team? Well, we're kind of out of time, so if it's quick, sure, but we are out of time.
Okay, thank you. My name is John Palmer. Yes, sorry, my name is John Palmer. Speaking on behalf of the Mokoro Residents and Ratepayers Association. Many of you will be aware, I'm a former councillor here. My past life, I was the stormwater manager for Tauranga City. I'm still currently a chartered engineer. So I've got some comments to add, and relating particularly to the brochure that you've put out. And one of the things is a comparison between option 1 and option 2, which is what I'll be focusing on. First thing is control and ownership. Through the discussions with the residents, what have you, there was a strong indication that residents want a strong voice in decision making. Well, under option 1, while decisions would shift to an independent board, this council will still retain full ownership of the assets. And so there would be residents would be better placed to have some influence on the decisions they're making. However, under option 2, council would only have ownership oversight, and that's clearly stated. And some people don't understand quite what the difference is, but that's ownership oversight of the assets. So all the decision making would be entirely with an independent board, and there really would be no opportunity for residents to be able to have any significant influence on any decisions that they make. In this regard, we believe that option 1 of the 2 options is the preferred option for this council. Going on to future costs and projected savings, we are told that our water infrastructure here in Western Bay is in excellent condition. This is due in part to it being relatively young. Council's 10-year plan clearly sets out the projected cost for wastewater treatment and other water infrastructure. There's no indication of the costs rising to the extent indicated in this brochure. Or is it that we will be expecting to subsidise other councils that we may choose to join with? Yes, there will be growth-related investment required in water infrastructure, but this should be covered by developer financial contributions, not existing ratepayers. Besides, growth means more ratepayers. So therefore, the cost of debt and operational costs should be spread. We are told that option 2 will provide better access to funding. There's no indication from council that there would be financial constraints in regard to implementing the water services program as set out in the 10-year plan. This council already has an excellent credit rating, so that the only benefit could possibly be a lower cost of future borrowing. There's a claimed 31% reduction in water costs is stated as being $4,000 to $5,000 per water connection over the next 10 years. I think it means per property, not per water connection. This would be $400 to $500 per year or per year per property. How robust is this information on cost savings when the state of our infrastructure and the projected costs in the 10-year plan? Talking particularly about option 2, this is the multi-council water services organisation. This is the council's preferred option. We refer to it as a CCO. This would involve handing over full control and management to a new entity. Now, where's an example of this? The only one really I can find is Wellington Water. 5 councils have their water services managed by Wellington Water. But there's been a lot of disquiet by these councils on the failure of the CCO to meet performance targets and its inability to accurately report the number of complaints. In March this year, a report was released that uncovered a lack of board oversight and assurance over financial processes and how consultants and contractors are managed. We now have the Commerce Commission getting involved, and they've launched an investigation of potential unlawful conduct by Wellington Water. It's clear that the directors of Wellington Water have not had their eye on the ball to the extent that the community expected. So those who believe that handing it all over to a CCO and everything's going to be rosy, all professionally managed and there were no issues. That doesn't seem to be what history is telling us.
John,
Also,
I think that
no-
we've really got to wind it up there. So,
Okay, if the 3 waters are going to be managed by independent boards nationwide, it's estimated to be a requirement for over 200 board directors. Are there sufficient people of the right caliber available? Are we going to have a pool of directors who serve on multiple boards? So I'll leave out the next bit, but just say on the basis of the information I've read and spoken about, I believe that the option recommended by the Mokara Residents and Ratepayers Association is that we go for option 1. Thank you.
and that's the single council CCO.
Yes, a single council CCO, yes.
Okay, are there any questions for the Mokara Residents and Ratepayers Association team? Councillor Joyce.
Couple of things. John, you're aware who sits on the board of Wellington Watercare?
Sorry?
Are you aware of the structure of the board of Wellington Watercare?
Yes, I know who they are, yes.
Yeah, a bunch of mayors, right?
Yes,
So basically, my point is that I think you'll find.
Ex-mayors.
Look, it's a bunch of politicians. I mean, I think you'll find that whatever Wellington Watercare is doing, that zig, the government's zagging the other way. So a better model might be Auckland Watercare. Another question though, you've gone with this single council CCO, and I appreciate the arguments, but you've also talked about a shortage of directors around the country. So if we all do single council CCOs, how do you square that issue with the idea of having a multitude of single council CCOs?
Yeah, well, obviously getting in early, I would imagine, and identifying the right people rather than leaving it late. Another CCO, which I was going to mention, was Watercare, Auckland. Now, that manages wastewater and water, but it does not manage stormwater, which remains with Auckland Council. And if you look at their board, it's a very professional board and it's very well run. So the stormwater issue, which I was going to talk about, but haven't got time, is a tricky, complex issue and doesn't fit neatly into the water and wastewater type of activity. And there are whole lots of issues there.
Thank you. Councillor
Could I
Daly.
add just something there?
Oh, sorry, did you want to come in?
In my age group, we're with a group of retired professionals. And there are professional people out there who would be more than capable of taking on those roles, but you just need to tap into the right sector to actually find them. Okay. And there are lots of them out there.
Okay. Councillor Daly.
My question is to Kath. Kath, you make a pretty strong case for a CCO and board control of the 3 waters. I've got a couple of quick questions. You talked about establishing a community trust to distribute the dividends, but surely if the goal is to keep the cost down to the end users or the ratepayers, then we want to plough all the money back into the system, I would have thought. But the second question is our next step, whether we form a single CCO or a multi-CCO, is to form an establishment committee to set up what that looks like for the board. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts would be on the mayors chairing that or an independent chair for that process.
In terms of the TECT model, you may realise that TECT often gives money back to its the people that provide them with the money. So it often goes back into electricity infrastructure. But unless you aim to make money, you aim to make a loss. It's too easy to make a loss in business. So that's why it must make money. So any money over must be redistributed. Given that the council is the shareholder, usually the money goes back to the shareholder, but I'm suggesting in this case, it actually goes back to the ratepayers through some form of, this is where you get Maori involvement, you get the people who are active in the community's involvement. That's how you get your community involvement, which is actually quite important. In terms of whether you form a single CCO or a multi-council CCO and your internal process in terms of deciding that, I do think you need an independent chair to do that, but somebody with a lot of commercial experience.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Maybench.
I just, a similar question to you, Kath. With your experience, how do you define who is the best when it comes to directors?
Well, you've got to have, firstly, you've got to have somebody who's commercially competent, because this entity will need to be commercially run, and that's what will have been lacking. Not lacking in terms of the management of your water utility, but what will be needed in the future environment. Not saying in any way the water engineers are deficient, because they're not. They're actually very good and recognised as such. But I think that you do need a lawyer on it, but not, for example, I've been involved in this public sector privatisation model where they've picked up a conveyancing lawyer who, in my opinion, is not a competent lawyer to deal with this. You need somebody with preferably strong legal background, but also has been involved in developing businesses, etc. And there are a huge number of those as well. The thing that drives the pricing of this, which is really key to ratepayers, is the return on assets. The value of the assets and the return of the assets will be determined by ComCom, same as in the electricity industry. So you need somebody who's more than an accountant. You need a financial analyst. And though there are quite a few of those in New Zealand as well. And that's why we suggest as ORA that you have some kind of human resources consultancy, people who can delve into the professional networks and find these people. For example, we played croquet with a chap who was approached to be a director for Christchurch Water. He turned it down because he doesn't want to commute between Tauranga and Christchurch. But there are a lot of these people around with a lot of experience.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. So I think that's I can't see any more questions. So the next speaker, Mr. Wilson, is not available, but the last speaker, Mr. O'Brien, is online apparently. But so we'll set that up in just a moment. But thank you very much for the three of you for coming and for sharing your views and for giving your submission. So thank you very much. Thank you.
And sir, will the information they provided be available to us?
I'm sure it can be if they
Kath?
provide it to us.
Yes, please. Especially when he couldn't supply, didn't have time.
Okay, so last up, we now have Mr. Nick O'Brien, who joins us via Zoom or Teams or online. So Nick, you've got 10 minutes, including questions. So in your own time, please give your oral submission.
Hi guys, can everybody hear me?
Yes,
we
can.
Hear me? Awesome, that's great. I feel a bit out of my depth here, but I want to talk about efficiency in water use, the way we're using water and how we're using the water personally and in our homes. And I believe there's huge gains we can make in actually the amount of water that we do that we are using personally in the house. 97% of the potable water that's supplied to homes is essentially wasted. We flush it down the toilet, we water our gardens with it, we wash our cars with it, and only 3% is actually used in a potable form. I believe that harnessing rainwater and using tanks, we have an opportunity to really increase the way we use water and the efficiency of that system, and reducing the pressure on the awesome people that supply water to our homes and businesses. Just strapping a water tank on the side of a house and collecting the rainwater, you could potentially save at least 18,000 litres of water per system per year. If you added in hose taps and laundries and other solutions, there is a real opportunity to increase that level of efficiency right up and save the council and the ratepayers mainly money in actually treating this water. Where was I? How did we go? So just give me a minute. There's three parts to this, like the water tanks that you could use, the correct size water tanks that would be strapped to a property. It would have three main benefits. Obviously, the water use reduction in water usage that the council has to supply to each house. It'll also buffer the stormwater system, which will mean a reduction in water going down the stormwater system. And it also supplies an emergency source of water in the case of a natural disaster. Where else are my notes here? The homeowner, if putting this on a residential house, the homeowner would not notice any reduction in water usage. They basically would have nothing. They wouldn't even notice it's there. It's just a simple and easy solution. The costs are relatively low, and this solution is massively scalable. With good design in a new, let's say a new residential dwelling, to add a rainwater system on the side of the house, as well as the reticulated system coming from the council, you can potentially reduce the water usage by up to 80% on a new build. This is obviously the benefits are pretty easy to see from there. It's also scalable into the commercial buildings. Some of the size of these factories that we've got in Tauranga, the roof areas are massive, and collecting that rainwater and using that is actually is relatively straightforward option and cost effective. And being able to use that would help reduce the pressure on the council freshwater systems. What else have I? It's really straightforward. I don't really know what else to add to that.
Okay, Mr. O'Brien, appreciate your input. So perhaps I'll start off the questions and ask what do you think the impact could be for council by saving this water?
Well, it's going to reduce the growth needed. I mean, we've got population growth, which the water reticulation stormwater systems have to keep up with. If we could implement the system and actually get a decent percentage of water usage, start lowering the average usage, that would allow a bit of breathing room for for infrastructure repairs and maintenance and growth. And as I said, it also buffers a stormwater system. I think down in Gore, they've already got a similar system with using rainwater tanks to buffer the stormwater system, because they've got some real problems with the stormwater system there.
Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. O'Brien? I've got Councillor Sol.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your submission. And yes, obviously saving and retaining water from our homes and so on is quite a nice option. But one of the things, what we're actually asking is, what option should we be going with? Without really putting words in your mouth, am I assuming that you say we can go alone if we reduce our consumption of the reticulated water, etc.? Is that what you're suggesting? Or are you suggesting that we should go with a multi-CCO? That's not clear from your submission.
I haven't got that far into it, into the terms of the two different options. Whichever option we take, this solution still backs up on both the systems. Whichever way you guys decide. I mean, I'm just a simple tradesman here. I'm probably, I feel a bit out of place in this situation, but I feel my point is still valid. This to me is the LED light bulb moment of water reticulation.
Right. Okay, that's fine. You don't have to fairly have to answer a question if you don't want to, sir. So are there any other questions for Mr. O'Brien? No? Okay, well, I think that's it. So thank you very much for contributing and joining us online, and thank you for your submission.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Cheers. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the submitters for hearing. And with that, oh no, we have one more thing to do. I need a mover and seconder for the recommendation that the written and verbal submissions to the local order done well consultation be received. Mover and seconder, Councillor Granger, Councillor Daly. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So with no information for receipt, I will declare the meeting closed at 1:50.